First of all, thank you all for coming. My opening statement is really just to start it off by thanking you for taking the time. I really have a disclaimer, and that is that this is, as you know, very much an evolving landscape. So I don't pretend to be the expert on everything. If I can answer questions, I will. If I can provide some type of insight, I will certainly do so. If I can't or don't, there's probably reasons for that, and I may end up. She's shaking her head. I may end up referring to a couple of my experts in the back of the room, or come back to you later with answers as we come. So we will do our best to provide some perspective. But thank you all for taking the time. I just want to open it up for questions.
Laird, now that this is approved, how many sports are going to be getting rev share funds, and what's the breakdown going to be among them?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, to answer that question, I would just say that the bulk of our revenue share funds will go to football and men's basketball, similar to the conversation you're seeing across the country, in large part in line with how monies are generated, but also the brand value that those student athletes bring to Mizzou. There will be other sports that will receive revenue share. Not all sports will, but there'll be opportunities for student athletes across our sports to receive those funds also.
Can you say what sports those are, and can those change year to year? Is this...
Yeah, first of all, to answer that question, they can change year to year, and I'm sure there will be a lot that we learn through this process, just like everyone else does as we enter into this for the first time. I don't feel like we're in a position to share specific sports or specific details and amounts, and the reason for that, candidly, is because until we're at a point where this process allows for that kind of transparency across the board with all sports, I just candidly don't see a competitive value or reason, a strategic incentive for us to disclose those specifics. I do think that will likely happen in time across the board, but until that time, I just don't think it's in the best interest of Mizzou.
Can you expand on that? OSU, A&M, Georgia, Ohio State today came out and said, there are schools that are sharing this. Is there a reason your situation is different to not do that?
It's just a strategic decision that we've made at this point, and likely as that comes out in the future across the board, we may change that position. But at this point, we feel like providing the insight we've had is far enough.
Laird, I think you referenced it in your statement even, and just a lot of the talk around this has been that it's driving college athletics to a more stable point. Just what does that specifically look like to you, and kind of what is the steps over the next few years to get to that point?
Yeah. Well, from a stable standpoint, I think what I mean by that is we are finally getting back to where we have real structure and real oversight. We are getting to a point where, as with revenue share, where those dollars are going to be reported to a cap system, a national system, as you know and have read about. We're going to get to a point where NIL deals do go through this NIL Go clearinghouse, and there'll be standards that have to be met. So, from that standpoint, I think it's good and healthy for everyone is to get to a type of environment where we're all playing by the same rules and having some consistency there. And I do think it gives us an opportunity to begin to stabilize college athletics, but it's a step, right? And it is not going to be perfect. I think we all have to recognize that there is going to be challenges as we work through this together and learn it together, and there's also going to be continued challenges to the system and process that we're going to have to work through. But it is a really important step.
On the clearinghouse, what is it about NIL Go and that algorithm that makes you think that could provide some stability to where we are in this landscape?
Well, first of all, we don't know the specifics of the algorithm or how that will play out yet. I think it's just the thought that what we have seen to this point and what has been developed behind the scenes by Deloitte and that will have real oversight from the CSC, it gives us a chance to have that kind of consistency. What it exactly looks like, we're gonna all have to learn together.
As far as from your understanding, the type of deals that will be approved by that algorithm, the type of deals that may be rejected by that algorithm, what does that look like? What can we sort of picture on that front?
We don't know, again,
Sure.
because we haven't gone through the process. So I think we'll have to learn as we go over the coming months. And as those third-party NIL deals are entered by student athletes and they receive information and feedback, then we'll learn with them. But until we go through that process, we can't speculate really any more than you can at this point.
Laird, it's my understanding across the SEC of that 20.5 million, every school in the conference is basically taking 2.5 million and creating new scholarships. So the amount of quote unquote revenue share money paid out is actually 18 million. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's consistent from a Mizzou standpoint, correct, and our understanding of what other schools are doing as well. Yes.
Was that like a directive from the conference or just kind of an
It
agreement?
was a
between
mutual
two?
commitment of the schools involved.
So then, one more on that. So then you said in your open letter this weekend that there's like $3 million worth of new scholarships. Is that on top of the 2.5, or is 2.5 of that part?
2.5 is inclusive of the 3.
Okay, okay.
You mentioned those scholarships, obviously, 2-for-1 ratio going to women's sports, we talk about investing in women's basketball and, the other women's sports. Why was that, an important directive for this athletic department?
Well, I think we have shown that we're committed to our Olympic sports, inclusive of our female sports in that as well. We're having some real success in some of those sports, as you've seen with volleyball, gymnastics, and others. So it was just an important part of that discussion. There was a lot of things that went into our decisions over the last years. We've been preparing for that, and investing in our Olympic sports, investing in our female sports was a big part of that. I am proud of that. I'm thankful that we were in a position to do that. I think that had a lot to do with this sort of collective decision we've made as a school and as a conference. And we've had other ways we were investing in some of the sports as well. As you may or may not be aware, in recent or coming months, we'll be investing significantly in baseball, the new field, track and soccer. We've done some things with our tennis indoor here recently. So we're continuing to invest in those areas, even in the face of some of these financial pressures.
I know you said you don't want to go into what sports are getting money and all that. Can you give us any insight into the process of how you go about making these decisions? I mean, I understand football and men's basketball, it's 90% of everything, but with the remainder of that money, what's the thought process?
I would just say it was a lot of conversation, really we had sort of a leadership team within our athletic department on the administrative side. Of course, we would come back to providing information to our leadership on campus, president, board, etc. But a lot of factors, a lot of data and input went into that. It would be difficult to extrapolate all that out and share the specific details, but it took a lot of discussion and a lot of thought on a lot of levels, both in terms of the brand value that those student athletes provide to the institution, our competitive positions, etc. There's a lot that went into that.
You talk about this still evolving at this moment in time this week. What's your biggest concern with this next phase?
I'd say just the concern is really just more of the operational and financial pressures that go into it. I mean, they're significant for us as they are for everyone. I do genuinely look at this as an opportunity for Mizzou. I think we are uniquely positioned to take advantage of this and continue to elevate. So, we're taking that stance. It is a lot to manage, and there's decisions that have to be made that can be difficult at times. And those decisions sometimes include taking a step back in areas that we've spent. So we're trying to be much more efficient with our dollars and look at ways where we might be able to pull back in some areas so that we can invest those dollars now into rev share or other types of areas that are going to really help us be successful.
You mentioned a lot of last year having to cut spending and having to find this $20 million. What can you share about where some of that comes from? I mean, I know you increased ticket prices, but as far as your operational, what changes? Yeah,
we looked at it at an in-depth level on the expense side, not just the revenue generation side. And certainly we're asking more of our people, the ticket prices, how we're adjusting some of our fundraising, et cetera. But we looked at areas like travel and dining and equipment and specific elements to what we do, and stepping back from a staffing standpoint, how do we approach certain areas, where do we need to apply our resources. So I would say it was across the board and inclusive, really everybody's touched, whether that's the administrative side or our sports. We're going to have to adjust and really kind of make room for this opportunity to provide more of those resources directly to student athletes.
Big picture, revenue-wise, how do you feel now, and how will you feel when the new CFP contract kicks in and the North End Zone comes online?
Well, I think, any athletic director worth their salt is going to say they're not, pleased yet with the revenue where we're at. I do feel like we've made significant improvements there, and I feel really good about the decisions we've made, how that's been embraced, and the response we've received from fans. Our ticket sales continue to go really well. Renewals are up to 80, the latest, Dave? 85, 86%. Which where we're at is tracking really well as compared to last year. That's just from a season ticket standpoint. It's football as an example, but the response to our new fundraising efforts, how that's been received by our donors has been really good. So I feel like we're tracking really well. We are making significant progress. I think we have an opportunity to take another significant step next year, but we're going to have to continue to push the envelope there, just like everyone will.
And specifically the new TV contract in the north end zone, how much of an impact is that gonna have, particularly when Gabe was just talking about the 20 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the amount that has been reported that's coming in from the CFP TV deal. How much of an impact will those two things have?
Yeah, well, not necessarily as we're looking at as much at just this next fiscal year, right? Where our focus is currently in managing this that's right in front of us. In future years, there is some significant upside from a CFP television standpoint, SEC, etc. That will certainly be helpful, and I think that the expenses are going to continue to go up as well, as including what we are compensating directly to student athletes through revenue share. And the north end zone is going to have a significant impact on our capacity to generate revenues. But in order for that to happen, we're going to have to continue to receive the kind of response that we need on the philanthropic side. So essentially, for us to utilize that north end as an opportunity to truly increase our revenues and help our bottom line, we need more and more of those dollars provided up front by our key contributors to help unlock that margin, if you will. So we're not just paying for the facility, we're pushing it to others, but it has a real opportunity, and we're tracking really well in that area. But that doesn't hit for a few years either, right? That's something else that has to take time to play out. So it's managing through these immediate fiscal years that we see in front of us, and then continue to be successful and continue to be competitive and win, so that we can realize more and more of those benefits down the road.
What have your conversations look like with different teams and coaches, just as far as preparing for this? I mean, not only over the last week, but also over the last few months, to make sure they're ready for July 1st.
Yeah, we have had multiple conversations, particularly with head coaches and our staff across the board at different times, preparing for the likely outcome of the House settlement and the ways we're going to need to adjust. And we've really tried to be very transparent and upfront with our staff, but particularly engage with head coaches as we're going through it, so they can start to prepare and think about it. Obviously it looks different depending on the sport and the coach in different ways, but across the board we've been communicating multiple times as a group and individually with their sport administrator, myself, etc.
You mentioned the transparency in the beginning. Every pro athlete, everyone knows what they make and where that money goes from the team, considering everything that is asked of college sports fans these days. Is that something they deserve to know here in the future?
Well, I would say that I think we are tracking more and more towards that atmosphere where we have that type of transparency. I don't think we're there yet, and in large part because we are still dealing with student athletes, and they are young people with legal protections from in some of those areas that have to be worked through, and we have to get advice on before we can provide those kind of specifics. So I could see that happening down the road, and it maybe that's in our future, but I think that's one of the many questions that has to be answered on the legal front first.
All right, speaking of the legal front, there are a lot of people out there who say this is going to last about 3 days. I mean, do you feel like you're at a place with an actual final solution, or is this, we might be back here next week?
I don't think that's an either or answer. First of all, I do think we have an opportunity to take a significant step, and we do have some structure and a foundation here to work from, and we do need to be committed to it and give it an opportunity to work and be successful. I mean, this is only going to be successful as the members decide, to make it, right? And if we are committed to it and give it a chance, then that's a starting place. Will there be lawsuits? Will there be continued outside pressures? Absolutely. right? And that's why it is a step, but it's not the last or final step, no. It's also why, we need, congressional support, right? Why we need to have, at some level, some federal action that gives us a level of protection so we can continue to move forward with the collegiate model and in a new way, in a new day. And we've taken an important step to move that forward, but it is only a step.
Through all of this, there's been a lot of talk and perception of the Big Ten and the SEC kind of pairing off and almost pulling away in terms of revenue and that kind of stuff. What's your view of that? The unofficial partnership with the SEC and the Big Ten kind of being in a different basket than the other leagues?
Well, I think that there's always going to be talk and speculation in our world about conferences and how they compete together and restructuring and all those things. So that is a common media topic. I will tell you that, in our rooms and the conversations that I have with other athletic directors, I just left Orlando where we were with all the FBS ADs, and there's a real commitment to seeing this through for the betterment of college athletics as a whole. We all are competitive, and we all need to keep pushing for our opportunities to be successful in that environment. But beyond that, I wouldn't speculate any further on those topics.
Laird, back on the congressional action for a second. I don't know how familiar you are with the SCORE Act that's being talked about in DC this week. Is that something that you would like to see come to fruition the way it's kind of looking now?
I wouldn't speak to the specifics just because I'm not up to speed enough to truly do that. I am encouraged that we are continuing to have real dialogue and we're making real progress in that area. And I am convinced that we're going to need that type of action and support for us to really get to a truly stable environment and be able to sort of protect the future of college athletics, particularly our Olympic sports, as we move this process forward. But the specifics I wouldn't speak to.
There aren't many coaches across the country that won't mention competitive advantage at some point in any press conference they ever give. Is it reasonable to expect that institutions are going to play ball with this system, that they are going to do this for, as you say, the betterment of college sports? Is that a reasonable expectation?
Well, I think we all have to make a commitment, particularly as leaders and as athletic directors, presidents, and I think that's what you're seeing and will continue to see. And even when you talk to coaches, particularly behind the scenes, they're tired of operating in the environment that we have been, right? So I do think coaches in particular, just by their nature, they like to know what the rules are, right? They want to know what the rules of the game are, and they're going to continue to push and try to get a competitive advantage. But we have to get to a point where we're at least operating from the same set of rules, and I believe we're all embracing that piece of it. We're all going to continue to push. We're all going to be aggressive, and Mizzou will be too, right? We're going to do what it takes to continue to win and be aggressive, but we also have to be committed to being a part of a larger whole.
I think the biggest confusion in all this is NIL now going forward. I mean, based on what people ask me, they think you guys just pay the kids and this is NIL now. How is that? I mean, what's your message to your fans, how that part is impacted and how much different it's going to be than it has been the last 4 years?
Yeah, I think to understand the new environment, you have to sort of step back and kind of set aside what NIL has been and think about how the structure of the settlement allows NIL to be moving forward. So I'll take a step back, kind of give you my 101 speech. First of all, moving forward, there's going to be 3 ways for student athletes to, receive some type of compensation from through college athletics. Obviously, you continue to have scholarships, right? Now, the good thing with scholarships is the limits have gone away. So, we've set roster limits, but us and many others are providing a lot more in scholarship support. But that's a piece of it. The second piece is this revenue share, which I think you could think of as more internal NIL. There's a lot of terms that are being thrown around, but that's the NIL type support that we are providing directly as an institution to student athletes. With that now is we have contracts with student athletes, though that has the cap, as you know, that is going through a system that's going to have oversight. So that's a new, better structured environment, and it's pretty historical if you step back and think about it. That on a national level, for the first time ever, we can provide those types of resources directly to student athletes. And then on top of that, you're going to have this third-party NIL. So that is separate from And you could think of that as more external NIL. I think of it as authentic NIL, as it was originally intended to be. And it's going to have to meet certain standards. It's going to go through this clearinghouse now. So student athletes are going to need to have approval of that, and it's going to have to meet those standards. So, who the payer is, those specific elements, meeting within that range of compensation that we're all waiting to learn more and more about. So we're going to need our businesses, our sponsors to really embrace that as part of the new era, and it's going to be on us as athletic departments, Learfield as our partner, to continue to integrate those types of opportunities in meaningful ways for sponsors. But we're going to need to really embrace that, and I see that as sort of the next element of or area of innovation, and where we can really help to try to give our sports and our programs another competitive leg up.
With these revenue sharing agreements, is there any more simplification with them compared to what you had to do before with NIL, where you had to evade so many legal circuits and everything? Is there any more simplification that makes it a benefit for teams and athletes?
I don't know if I would say simplification. They are going through adjustments. Obviously we are working with Every True Tiger brands, with our attorneys and our staff to really think through all those things and those contracts. And they're evolving and adjusting to reflect, the latest standards within the House settlement. But I wouldn't call it simplification.
Can you sign multi-year contracts with kids?
Yeah, that's an option. Sure.
How important is that moving forward? Some of the situations we've seen, especially in recent weeks, are multi-year agreements a must moving forward?
I think that's going to be a case-by-case basis based on the school and how they want to approach it, as well as the student athletes. It's going to be one of the many things that's negotiated, typically through agents these days. So I do think that that's going to be an important element and can provide some balance and commitment and consistency on both sides, which I think is healthy and good. But it's going to be different depending on the school, the sport, the student athlete.
Obviously, there's a lot of things you guys have to keep track of these days, especially for head coaches. How much of a difference, you guys obviously just hired a GM for men's basketball, how much of a difference do you think that kind of hire will make, and do you think that's something that you see growing and expanding in college athletics?
Yeah, I think there's no question that we all have to continue to really invest in this area with people that are focused on maximizing the opportunities that it provides and have experiences, relationships, knowledge of how to navigate that space. So whether it's that position in particular, I think you'll see different schools do it different ways. One of our big advantages in my mind is how advanced and just professional, thoughtful our Every True Tiger Bands group, and particularly Brad Larondo and effectively our GM, right, for our department, and how that works. It's not a department employee. It's part of that NIL marketing firm, but he does a wonderful job. Our staff there does a great job. It's a really good advanced system, and that kind of operational excellence is an advantage of ours that we're able to continue to lean into. We're not necessarily having to create some of the infrastructure that others are creating, because that's such a good organization. So we all have to really assess our individual departments, how we operate, and be willing to evolve those types of investments in staff.
On the roster limits, do you have a sense of how many athletes are going to have the quote-unquote grandfathered in spots for this 25-26 year?
Not yet. No, it's too early in that process. We are definitely learning as we go there as well, and trying to work with our coaches, student athletes, to navigate it. But we'll know more here in the coming weeks. I think we have a deadline of what's the deadline for us to turn in our designated student athlete list. July 6th. So we have some time.
Is that for all sports?
Yeah.
And is that something that's at coaches' discretions, or like there's going to be an athletic department wide allotment, or I guess just what are the considerations?
It's something that we work with our coaches on. They still have the authority and ability to determine their rosters, right? From a competitive standpoint, they need to be able to do that. And then the specifics of how the designated student athlete piece apply to that, that's something we work with them together on. But we empower coaches to make decisions, and then we support them to help understand the nuances of the settlement and the application of all that.
Time for a couple more.
What are the logistics of revenue sharing pay? I mean, they start July 1st, are these monthly payments to kids? Are they, hey, if you transfer out in December, you don't get any more payment? How's this all work?
Most of them are structured as monthly payments. I think you'll see that be maybe a different thing at different places as well. We all, as institutions, and how we choose to operate that could do it differently. But essentially, yeah, they go out as monthly payments for the most part.
So do you feel like a GM, a team president, like how has your feeling about your role changed?
You know, in some ways, it is certainly evolving and changing. There's no question. And, you know, we have to lean in more and more to the business side, the strategic side. I do feel like we're more and more change managers than we have been in the past. But I think that's an important opportunity. And in a lot of ways, while it's challenging, it's also a real opportunity. It's a real opportunity to positively impact your place if you're willing to really dig in, think differently, be strategic and smart, be aggressive in how we think things through. So I actually enjoy a lot of that process and working with a really smart team behind the scenes to manage through all of it. But there is no question it's taken a significant amount of time. And one of the things I struggle with on a personal basis is it doesn't allow me the time to maybe lean into some more relational or time elements with programs, teams, student athletes that I would like. You know, there's things like that you have had to kind of take a step back as we really, you know, put time and resource and thought into this. So I am looking forward to hopefully getting to a day where we can do some of the things that we maybe were able to do more as kind of traditional athletic directors. But we also have to accept the fact that it's evolving and embrace that, because that's what's best for Mizzou.
Circling back to the men's basketball program, hiring a GM, it seems like the boulder for a lot of teams to want to do that has been kind of the different power structure it creates compared to the professionals where the GM is in charge. What have your conversations been with like Dennis, and kind of how do you expect to work with Tim and that staff now?
Yeah, so you know, I think I found it interesting. One of the interesting elements of this is the interpretation or definition of GM at different places is different, right? And you know, that's why with Coach Gates, that was important to him. He wanted to have that kind of role on staff and have somebody that can really help him interact directly with agents and, you know, manage some of those kinds of elements. So it is going to be different depending on the coach and the sport, and I think that's important, is that we meet coaches where their needs are. You know, some coaches are positioned differently to manage this than others, so we need to support them in, you know, whatever they need, but it also has to then fit within our overall structure and have an accountability to how we manage and make sure we're going, you know, through the process that we are establishing to meet the specifics of the house settlement. So there's a lot to it, but ultimately we need to continue to empower our coaches to lead.
One more. All right.
Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
everybody.
Thanks, Larry.